Okay, so you're probably here to get a better handle on this whole Canadian ban on some assault-style firearms,
Right.
the one that kicked in on March 7th, 2025.
Yeah,
I know there's a ton of info out there, and it could be, well, it can be tricky to sort it all out.
yeah,
What's true, what's not.
for sure.
So we're going to deep dive into this. We've got the official announcement from the Canadian government, and we've got some insights from BC Firearms Academy.
Absolutely.
And just a heads up, we found some things that surprise us. For example, did you know that over 19,000 makes and models are still perfectly legal for hunting and sport shooting?
It's true. A lot of folks don't realize that.
Yeah. So let's get right to it. What exactly is banned here?
So the government's definition targets semi-automatics, but with some specifics. Sustained rapid-fire capability, large capacity magazines, and a tactical or military design.
Okay, so not all semi-automatics, just these specific types.
Exactly. And the government's saying these features make them unsuitable for hunting or sport shooting.
Unsuitable. Okay, how do they decide that? I mean, isn't that kind of subjective?
Well, that's where the Firearms Reference Table comes in, the FRT. It's the official list that categorizes firearms in Canada.
Okay.
So this ban adds 179 specific makes and models to the prohibited category.
So the FRT, that's like the go-to guide for firearm owners in Canada then?
It is. It's how you know what's legal and what's not. For example, a lot of people think the SKS rifle is banned now.
Yeah, I've heard that.
But it's not true. The SKS is still legal.
Interesting. So can you give us a few examples from these 179 newly banned firearms? Just to, paint a picture.
Sure. One that stands out is the M1 Carbine. It's got a long history,
Yeah.
lots of variants.
Right.
Well, many of those variants are now prohibited.
I bet that's a big deal for collectors. The M1 Carbine, I mean, that's a piece of history.
It is. And then there's some more modern designs on the list too, like Turkish bullpup shotguns.
Turkish, huh? A bullpup shotgun. What even is that? I've never even heard of that.
A bullpup design, it puts the action behind the trigger group. So it's shorter overall, but keeps the same barrel length.
So more compact, but still banned because of the other features.
Exactly. And then there's the Chiappa M19. Most people probably haven't heard of that one.
Right.
Shows you the range of firearms on this list.
Yeah, so it's not just like a couple of obvious ones. It's a lot of different types.
Yeah.
Okay, so say someone already owns one of these newly banned firearms. What happens then?
Well, the government has put in place what they're calling an amnesty period. It runs until March 1st, 2026. It's designed to protect lawful owners while they figure out how to comply.
So they don't, get in trouble right away.
Exactly.
But what does that mean, complying? What are their options?
Well, they can deactivate the firearm so it can't be used.
Okay.
They can sell it to someone who's eligible, like a licensed firearms business.
Okay.
Or, of course, they can surrender it to the authorities.
Okay, so a few different ways to do it.
Right. And at BC Firearms Academy, we can guide folks through these options and make sure they understand everything.
That's great. Speaking of BC Firearms Academy, how are you supporting your clients with all these new regulations?
Safety education and responsible ownership are the most important things for us.
Of course.
We want to make sure our clients understand these changes so they can make informed decisions and comply with the law.
What does that look like in practice?
We're giving people detailed information on the banned firearms, explaining how to comply, answering any questions they might have.
I'm sure there are a lot of questions right now.
Absolutely. And we're also working to debunk all the myths and misinformation that tends to pop up around these kinds of regulations.
Yeah, it's always a problem. So you're not just saying, here's how to comply. You're also making sure people really understand what's going on.
That's right. Knowledge is power, right? Especially when it comes to firearms, we want our clients to be informed and responsible.
Makes sense. So if someone's not sure about their firearm or what to do, BC Firearms Academy can help.
Absolutely. We can help them figure out if their firearms are affected by the ban, what their options are, make sure they're meeting all the legal requirements. We also help people get their PLL, their possession and acquisition license.
That's essential, right? To legally own a firearm in Canada.
It is. And that process can be complicated. So having guidance from BC Firearms Academy can really help. Take them through the application, make sure they're eligible, and provide the training they need.
That's great. It's good to know there are resources out there to help people understand these regulations and stay on the right side of the law.
And remember, firearm regulations, they're always evolving. What's legal now might not be legal later. That's why it's so important to stay informed and get guidance from reliable sources, like BC Firearms Academy.
That's a good point. So beyond this specific ban, what advice would you give to firearm owners in Canada who want to make sure they're doing things the right way?
Well, first, do your research. Stay up to date on anything the government announces or proposes. You can find good info on the RCMP website and through the Canadian Firearms program.
So be proactive.
Exactly. Second, connect with organizations like BC Firearms Academy. We provide updates, training, and resources. And finally, don't hesitate to ask questions. If something's unclear, get clarification. It's always better to be safe than sorry.
Great tips. Be informed, be prepared, be proactive.
Exactly. And we're here to help you every step of the way.
Well, this has been incredibly helpful so far. We've learned about the specifics of this ban, how important it is to comply, the role of BC Firearms Academy, and even about firearm ownership in Canada in general. But before we wrap up this first part of our conversation, let's talk a little bit more about the Amnesty program itself.
So you mentioned the Amnesty program earlier. It's really important. It gives lawful owners time to comply with the ban without, facing any penalties.
Right. But it's not like they can just sit back and do nothing. They have to take certain steps during that time.
Absolutely. So the amnesty runs until March 1st, 2026. During that time, owners of these prohibited firearms can't sell them, can't transfer them, except in very specific situations, like to a licensed firearms business, for example. And they have to store them safely and securely, following the same rules as before the ban.
So even during the amnesty period, there are still rules. They can't just wait until the last minute.
Exactly. It's really important to understand those requirements so they can keep possession legally.
So what about after the amnesty ends? What can owners do to become fully compliant? I know we touched on this before.
Right, we did, but it's worth going over again. So one option is to deactivate the firearm, make it so it can't fire permanently.
Okay.
Might involve some specific modifications, to make sure it's unusable.
So that way they can keep it, maybe for sentimental reasons, but it's not a working firearm anymore.
Right. Another option is to sell it, but only to someone who's eligible, like a licensed firearms business or someone with a special license for prohibited firearms.
So it stays within a controlled legal framework.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's always the option to surrender it to the authorities.
Right.
Turn it over to law enforcement and they'll dispose of it.
So different options depending on the situation.
Right. And that's where BC Firearms Academy can help. We can explain the options, figure out what makes the most sense for each person, and walk them through the whole compliance process.
That's really valuable, especially when you're dealing with, complicated regulations and something that might be very personal to the owner.
Absolutely.
Now, I know a lot of people who bought these firearms legally are wondering about compensation. Can you tell us a bit about that, the Assault-Style Firearms Compensation Program?
Yes, so the government is working on a program to provide fair compensation to both businesses and individuals.
So?
Anyone affected by this ban.
So even someone who bought their firearm years ago, before this ban was even a thing, they could still get compensation.
That's the idea. The details are still being worked out. But they want to provide fair market value for the prohibited firearms.
That's good to hear. It gives people a little bit of, reassurance. They might be feeling frustrated or uncertain right now, and understandably so.
For sure. We understand that this ban is a big deal for lawful firearm owners, and we're here to support them through this process.
Speaking of support, I know BC Firearms Academy does a lot to educate people about safe and responsible firearm ownership. Can you tell us a bit about your approach to training and education?
Absolutely. At BC Firearms Academy, we believe that education is the key to safe and responsible firearm ownership. We offer a variety of courses, including the Canadian Firearms Safety course, which is required to get your...
So teaching people how to handle firearms safely and responsibly right from the beginning.
Exactly. Courses cover everything.
Okay.
From handling and storage to transportation and all the legal requirements. We even talk about the ethical aspects of firearm ownership and how important it is to use them responsibly.
That's great. It's more than just the technical stuff. It's about the bigger picture of being a firearm owner in Canada.
It is. We want to create a culture of safety and responsibility among firearm owners.
Okay.
So it's not just about knowing the law, but also about really understanding those ethical principles that guide safe and responsible use.
And you're also doing a lot to, debunk myths and misinformation about firearms.
There are so many misconceptions out there, often because of, how the media covers things or what people see online.
Right. What are some of the common myths you come across?
Oh, one of the big ones is that if you own a firearm, you're automatically more likely to be violent.
Yeah, I've heard that.
It's just not true.
Right.
The vast majority of firearm owners are law-abiding citizens who use their firearms responsibly for sport shooting, hunting, or self-defense.
So it's important to challenge those assumptions.
Exactly. We also hear myths about how effective certain types of firearms or ammunition are, and those myths can be dangerous. They give people the wrong idea about what actually happens when a firearm is used.
Right. It's about providing real evidence-based information.
It is. We want people to have a realistic understanding of firearms. So for us, informed and responsible firearm ownership starts with education. We want to give people the knowledge and skills they need to make safe and ethical decisions, both at the range and in everyday life.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about this specific ban and what owners have to do, but let's zoom out a bit. Look at the bigger picture. This ban on certain assault-style firearms, it's obviously, part of a much bigger conversation about gun control in Canada.
Oh, for sure. It's a really complex issue, and people have strong feelings about it on all sides.
We've heard the government's reasons for this ban, keeping the public safe, saying these firearms aren't meant for regular people to use. But what are some of the arguments we're hearing from, say, firearm owners and groups that support gun rights?
Well, one of the main concerns we hear is that this ban is unfair to responsible firearm owners, people who use these firearms legally and safely for sport shooting, or maybe they're collectors.
Right.
They say the focus should be on the reasons why gun violence happens in the first place, like mental health problems or criminal activity, not on restricting access for law-abiding citizens.
It's also interesting to think about this ban in the context of, the history of gun control in Canada.
Absolutely.
We've had different rules and restrictions over the years, and each one has, sparked debates and had different effects.
Exactly. It's important to see this ban as part of a bigger picture, the ongoing story of gun control measures. Understanding the history helps us analyze how effective it might be and consider what it means for firearm ownership in Canada in the long run.
And speaking of the long term, what are some of the questions we should be asking ourselves now that this ban is in place?
Well, one big question is, will it actually work? Will this ban actually reduce gun violence? Or will criminals find other ways to get firearms? We need to look at that. And it's also important to keep an eye on how this affects legal firearm owners.
Yeah, that's crucial.
Will it discourage people from owning firearms responsibly? Will it lead to even more restrictions down the road?
Those are some really important questions, tough questions.
Yeah.
And there aren't any easy answers, are there?
Not really, no.
It'll be interesting to see how this all plays out over the next few years, how this ban shapes the conversation around gun control in Canada.
Definitely. And it shows just how important it is to stay informed and be part of this discussion.
Yeah, I agree.
No matter what your views are on gun control, we need to understand the facts, the arguments, and what the potential consequences are. That's how we can have a real, constructive conversation about such an important issue.
Well said. We've covered a lot today, haven't we?
Yeah.
The specifics of the ban, what owners need to do to comply, the role of organizations like BC Firearms Academy in promoting safety and education.
We have. And we've talked about why it's so important to stay informed, to rely on good sources of information, and to engage in thoughtful discussion about this issue.
If you're looking for more information about this ban, about firearm safety, or how to get a PL, we highly recommend checking out the BC Firearms Academy website.
Absolutely.
They're a fantastic resource for anyone who wants to be a responsible firearm owner in Canada.
They are. They're really committed to promoting a culture of safety, education, and compliance. They can give you really valuable guidance as we all figure out these changing firearm regulations.
That's for sure. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Canada's 2025 assault-style firearms ban. We hope this has given you a better understanding of this complicated topic.
We do, and we encourage you to keep learning about this, stay engaged, and help create a safe and responsible firearm culture here in Canada.
Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.